Imagine entering a dimly lit forest in central Italy, only to find yourself face to face with a giant stone mouth frozen in a scream. This is the Sacro Bosco of Bomarzo, Italy's eerie garden of monsters. Carved directly into living rock, its gargantuan sculptures of mythic beasts, gaping faces, and strange hybrids turn a simple woodland stroll into what one historian calls a Renaissance version of a haunted house. Here, the air is thick with mystery. Inscriptions like "All reason departs" are carved above a titanic open maw, the so-called mouth of hell. The stones themselves seem alive, mossy eyes following visitors among the trees. In this haunted grove, every path leads to another shock, and no one truly knows why these monsters were placed here. The Park of Monsters, Parco dei Mostri, is filled with gigantic, unsettling sculptures like the infamous Mouth of Hell that visitors can walk through. Note the cavernous open mouth in the foreground. The sculpture famously bears the red inscription, "All reason departs" above it, hinting at the garden's aim to unsettle. Source: Smithsonian Magazine. A Duke and His Dark Vision. The mastermind behind this uncanny garden was Prince Pier Francesco Orsini, 1523 to 1583, nicknamed Vicino Orsini. A proud condottiero, soldier for hire, from one of Italy's noble families, Orsini inherited Bomarzo as a young man. In 1545, he married Giulia Farnese, a relative of Pope Paul III, and the couple lived at Villa Orsini overlooking the future park. In 1547, Orsini began what would become the Sacro Bosco, a sacred grove, though sacred here means enchanted or bewitched, not holy. Typical Renaissance estates prized order and harmony, but Orsini broke the mold. He hired architect Piero Ligorio, who had worked on St. Peter's in Rome, to design a garden meant to shock. Instead of neatly trimmed hedges and fountains, the Sacro Bosco was conceived as a wild, mind-bending experience. Orsini's personal life adds layers to the story. After years on the battlefield, he fought in the brutal wars against France during the 1540s and 1550s. He was even captured and held prisoner for ransom. When Orsini finally returned home, he suffered a devastating loss. His young wife, Giulia, died soon after. Plunged into grief, Orsini poured all his emotions into the garden. He later wrote that he received every sort of consolation by having the Sacro Bosco in place of his dearest beloved, and one carved inscription simply reads, "Sol per sfogare il core," Italian for "only to relieve the heart." After her death, he even commissioned a grand tomb for Giulia. It's clear the Sacro Bosco was, at least in part, a living memorial, a sprawling stone elegy for the Duke's lost love. Monsters with meaning and mischief. What exactly did Orsini intend by each bizarre sculpture? Unfortunately, no letters or plans survive to spell it out. All that remains are riddles and hints carved into the stone itself. For example, flanking the entrance are two stone sphinxes, half lion, half woman. Each sphinx holds an inscription. One asks, "Whoever does not pass through this place silent and amazed," while the other asks if these wonders are meant to astonish or merely to provoke thought. These riddles set the tone. They warn that nothing here is straightforward. Unlike other Renaissance gardens with a single myth or theme, Bomarzo intentionally offers no single narrative. Its winding paths have no fixed itinerary, and every turn reveals a new strange scene, as if each sculpture sprang from a dream or nightmare. Not all of the monsters are entirely imaginary. This three-headed dog, Cerberus, here carved in limestone, is one of the guardians of the underworld from Greek myth. At Bomarzo, Stepping past Cerberus symbolically lets visitors, and Orsini himself, journey toward death and the afterlife, much like the mythic hero Orpheus venturing into Hades. The haunting stone visage of Cerberus underscores the garden's theme of death and rebirth. Some statues are directly lifted from classical myths. A colossal sculpture shows Hercules wrestling the fire-breathing giant Cacus. One account says Hercules' own face was given to Orsini himself. Nearby stand massive stone turtles carrying maidens on their backs, and a gaping whale with wild, jagged teeth. One beloved carving is a grand statue of Neptune reclining by a fountain. But here, even Neptune is twisted into grandeur. Mossy and weathered, he lurks in shadow like an ancient sage, reminding visitors of old gods and ancient waters. Not everything was purely somber. A famous sculpture called the Mouth of Hell, or Orcus, a giant open mouth framed by wild hair and fangs, might represent grief's abyss. But it also doubled as a banquet hall. As one 16th century guest wrote, "Inside that cavern, the tongue is used as a table and the teeth as the seats, candlelight flickering from the eyes. Imagine dining amid teeth and talking sculptures, a ghastly but ingenious party trick. This playful perversity, a mixture of laughter and horror, was intentional." Even the elephant sculpture, with a fierce war horse or warrior riding atop its back, is said to reference the Carthaginian general Hannibal's elephants. It crushes a Roman soldier in its trunk. It seems Orsini twisted history, mythology, and personal emotion all into his stone bestiary. An allegory of grief and the world. Scholars have spun many theories about the garden's meaning. Some view it as an allegory, a collection of symbols drawn from Orsini's library. Renaissance nobles loved their classics, and Orsini knew Ovid's Metamorphoses, Dante, Petrarch, and more. Descending into the underworld past Cerberus might invoke Orpheus's journey for Eurydice, hinting at Orsini's own mourning. The temple built late in the park's construction, not a monster, but a classical shrine, may have honored Orsini's dead wife. Some accounts even call it the Temple of Eternity to Julia. Others see the garden as a grand tribute to antiquity itself. The landscape around Bomarzo is dotted with Etruscan remains, burial mounds, hidden tombs, even a small pyramid nearby. Orsini modeled parts of his park on these ancient tombs. Stone benches and monuments adopt Etruscan styles, and many of the figures were carved in situ from the rugged volcanic rock, the same living stone the Etruscans prized. In this way, every monster could be read as an echo of the past, voices of the earth itself given form. But perhaps the simplest idea is this. The Sacro Bosco is a personal theater of emotion. Rather than conquer his pain in quiet sorrow, Orsini gave it physical form. The grotesque mix of creatures stands as an externalization of inner turmoil, the anger, confusion, and wonder that grief can feel. As one modern curator puts it, many of the park's features are meant to haunt the visitor's memory. You wander through this rambling wood, not knowing what comes next, much as someone navigating sorrow cannot predict its twists. There might not be one message carved on stone, but the overall story reads like a Renaissance horror fantasy with a deeply human heart at its core. From obscurity to cult legend, Orsini's Garden of Monsters would nearly vanish after his death. By the 17th century, it was neglected and overgrown, known only to local villagers. For centuries, no receipts, account books, or commission documents survive to guide historians, and the park lay mostly in ruin. But after World War II, a curious revival occurred. Italian writer Mario Praz, surrealist painter Salvador Dali, and poet Jean Cocteau, among others, stumbled upon Bomarzo and spread word of its uncanny wonders. In 1948, Dali shot a short film at Bomarzo and later incorporated its imagery into his famous painting, The Temptation of St. Anthony. Argentine novelist Manuel Mujica Lainez, author of Bomarzo, fictionalized Orsini as a tragic anti-hero. And an opera was even composed from the story. Restoration began in earnest around 1954, under a local patron, the Bettini family. They cleared the woods and pieced the park back together, so we can still wander Orsini's creation today. Modern visitors come not only for the shock, but for the inspiration. In this digital age of formulaic theme parks, Bomarzo feels profoundly original and mysterious. Its carved stones inspire photographs, blogs, and artistic reverie. As the Smithsonian magazine notes, the garden continues to cast its spell and remains as baffling as ever. A stone elephant in the Park of Monsters, one of Bomarzo's most famous statues. Notice the figure of a man perched on the elephant's back at right. Some scholars think this alludes to Hannibal's elephants in Roman times. In any case, the elephant sculpture, like many at Bomarzo, is slightly askew and overgrown, blending ferocity with decay. Symbols etched in stone. As you stroll Bomarzo today, clues confront you everywhere. Nearly every statue has an inscription or reference. Near the Etruscan-style bench is carved, "The Garden of Monsters resembles only itself and nothing else." A self-declared riddle. It dares you to compare the incomparable. On another panel, an Italian poem laments, "The whole world is a roaming journey," perhaps echoing Orsini's own life wanderings. The Sphinx's riddles at the gate still stand to challenge any newcomer. Even the ground whispers history. Beneath the oaks lie the graves of the Bettini restorers, showing how new layers of story accrete around the old ones. An inscribed Etruscan bench in the sacred grove of Bomarzo. Inscriptions snake across the arch, including quotations that speak of the world as a wandering journey. Many benches and sculptures here bear enigmatic messages, reminding visitors that this is both a place of funhouse spookiness and serious contemplation. Every visitor today feels a personal reaction. Some feel eerily watched by stone eyes. Others feel awe, amusement, or even peace. There is no guidebook answer to why, and perhaps Orsini wanted it that way. As one art historian observes, traditional Renaissance gardens are meant as safe respites. But Bomarzo's forest is built on surprises and provocations. It challenges visitors to solve its riddle, yet offers no simple solution. Maybe it was a kind of Renaissance surrealism, a place where the nobleman victim of history turned his own life into art. Enduring enigma. 300 years separate us from Pier Francesco Orsini, yet Bomarzo still breathes his question. What do we do with loss, wonder, and the unknown? Every carved face here tells us something about the Renaissance mind. Its debts to antiquity, its fascination with mythology, and its willingness to shatter perfection. But more than that, the Park of Monsters whispers secrets about Orsini himself. Was he exorcising demons? Mocking death? Or simply admitting that grief can only be expressed in sculpture and sorrowful poems? Historians are still divided, and maybe the answer doesn't matter. What matters is that Bomarzo remains itself and nothing else. As one 16th century inscription put it, the park exists to astonish. It is an invitation. Walk into this sacred grove and let your imagination roam. To countless travelers, artists, and dreamers since the 1500s, it has been precisely that, a garden of riddles and revelations. And so, long after Orsini's life, The Garden of Monsters stands not as a solved puzzle, but as a living mystery. In the ruins and the monsters, each visitor finds a new story. Perhaps that is the greatest legacy of Bomarzo. In the murmur of Italian oaks and the stare of stone lions, we find a mirror of our own fears and hopes, forever engraved in rock.